One, we're about to start the webinar. Anyway, I hope you all had a wonderful time with your families during the holidays. So we're just starting a new year and we all want to start it right, don't we? So to help us with that, I'd like to introduce to you our very charming and brilliant presenter, Miss Caitlin Mock. She is a U.S. registered dietitian certified by the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. She formerly served as the lead bariatric dietitian for the Ohio State University Medical Center. Now, after her presentation, you might ask questions at the end by typing your questions on the chat box on your panels. I'm sure you can see that. You just type in your question at the end. Caitlin will answer them. She'll do her best to answer all of your questions, but if we run out of time, you can join our Facebook support group or go to our knowledge base section on our website. Okay, so without further ado, I'll turn you over to Ms. Caitlin Mock.
Thanks, Hazel, and thanks everyone for joining today. So our topic for today is to talk about weeks 3 to about 6 months post-op and kind of what that entails. We will be discussing all procedures, including the gastric sleeve, the gastric bypass Roux-en-Y, and also a gastric band. So if you have any questions about your specific surgery, once again, please, go ahead and type it in the questions box or the chat box, and I will answer those. And I'll kind of tell you within the presentation of when I'm specifically talking about kind of which procedure. So today we'll talk about the diet advancement, what tips for success are, exercise recommendations, vitamin and mineral recommendations, protein, calorie, and fluid intake, and then what your kind of expected weight loss is. So first off, we'll talk about those first couple of weeks, so weeks 3 and 4, and this is particularly related to those that have had the gastric sleeve. For those patients that have had a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass or the gastric banding procedure, usually a lap band, this is your week 1 and 2 diet. So purees continue for those on the gastric sleeve for weeks 3 and 4. So you're going to want to continue to keep portion sizes small, around 1/4 cup to 1/2 of a cup. Most people can do closer to that 1/2 a cup with purees, but go ahead and just listen to your own body throughout this. That's always really important, is to pay attention to those hunger and fullness cues that your body is sending you. And that's really going to help you not only initially after surgery, but even more importantly later on as you kind of transition into being a normal person, quote unquote, after the surgery. You'll want to continue to avoid fluids for 30 minutes after eating, and once again avoiding straws too, if you remember that recommendation from earlier. Protein goals at this point, for females, we like to have at least 60 grams. If you're a taller female, usually closer to 70, maybe even 80, and for men, at least 70 grams. Fluid goals are about 48 to 64 ounces. I really like to see people getting to 64 ounces more so than the 48. Now, included in that 64 ounces can be milk, the liquid from a protein drink, maybe the broth and some soups. So it can include other things besides water. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then calorie goals, hopefully you're getting at least 800 to 1,000 calories per day, depending on your surgery and how quickly you're recovering, what your tolerance level is. This may be a high amount for some people, but I do want to make sure that you understand the goal is not to cut your calories to 0 or 200 or 300. Our goal is not to starve you skinny, right? We want to do this in a healthy way and to preserve your lean muscle tissue and support your metabolism so that once you've lost the weight, you can continue to have a good metabolism to maintain that weight that you want to be at. So this is a sample pureed diet. Once again, the portions can kind of be adjusted a little bit depending on what your tolerance level is. A half a cup of cream of wheat cereal. Any cereal at this point, you really want it to be a fairly kind of soupy consistency. You don't want really thick, hot cereal, okay? I always kind of compare it to wallpaper paste, you know, that oatmeal or that cream of wheat that's so thick, if you flung it on the wall, it would stick. So you want this nice and soupy kind of creamy hot cereals. You can add creamy peanut butters, protein powders, or dry powdered milk for extra protein. And if you can, make it with at least 1 or 2% skim milk or soy milk, but some kind of other liquid like those milk-based kind of products that has the protein. Because that's another 4 to even maybe 5 grams of protein that you can get from making it with a milk or soy milk compared to water. And then again, maybe like 3 or 4 hours later, half a cup of an instant breakfast drink is a really good thing to have on hand. This is kind of one of those staple products that I think is nice for most people. Another thing is the cottage cheese, mixing it with some crushed pineapple or maybe stewed tomatoes. The protein drinks are usually still important at this point to reach those protein goals. So you can count that as one of your mini meals or a snack. The blended vegetable soups work really well, as does chili or a chicken or a beef and vegetable. A lot of people at this point are getting really sick of the protein drinks, the hot cereals, the cottage cheese, the blended soups, and that's just kind of the way it is. It's not fun, it's not an exciting diet, but it is really important. And so you just have to remember that it's short term, and at this point you only have a couple weeks left to go. So just kind of, buckle up those pants and march to the finish line for those last 2 weeks. And then the last thing is some high protein chocolate pudding. This is really easy, and you can kind of play with it and make it your own, but using a sugar-free pudding mix, adding some dry powdered milk to it, or once again some kind of almond butter or peanut butter that's nice and creamy, or maybe a little bit of protein powder. You can adjust it to sort of what you like to have, and to get the highest kind of protein content that you can. All right, so the soft diet. So for gastric sleeve patients, this starts at 1 month. For my Roux-en-Y patients and those that have had a gastric band, this starts at about day 15 or just after that 2-week mark. So soft foods are just that. They're very soft, tender, well-cooked foods. You want to think about vegetables that have been steamed, fruits that are cooked. You can do raw bananas that are fairly ripe. That's the one kind of raw food that is usually not an issue for anyone. Meat should be very tender, moist, well-cooked. Think about those meats that come out of a crock pot that just kind of fall apart because they're so tender. They've been cooking really low and slow all day long. Other things that go well are unbreaded fish, meatloaf. You can also do really good turkey meatloaves. And then canned tuna, chicken. You could also do a beef or pork that's canned. Once again, look for a lower fat version. And then you'll want to mix it with some kind of creamy, soft consistency-based product, like an avocado that's smashed, or maybe a cream soup, or a low-fat mayonnaise or Miracle Whip. So starches at this point, a lot of people have done mashed potatoes. You can do some kind of potato dish that has peeled potatoes in it. You'll want to avoid a really thick, fibrous potato skin. So some of like the red skin potatoes are okay because that skin's very soft, and if you've done like a mashed red skin where you keep the skins on them, usually that's well tolerated. But it is probably good to kind of err on the side of caution and to avoid that peeling if possible. You can also do brown rice, whole wheat bread, different beans and legumes, and again, some of that hot soupy kind of base cereal. You do want to be cautious with some of the starches, specifically the pastas, the brown rice, the bread, or white rice really for that matter, not just brown rice. But those starches sometimes can kind of give you a feeling of like they're swelling in your new stomach pouch. And it's basically kind of what's going on is that those foods are mixing with your saliva and your digestive enzymes, and they do kind of give that feeling of swelling a little bit which can kind of feel like a rock sometimes, is sort of just stuck in your stomach. So be cautious. Some people can tolerate them better than others. If you have them for the first time, just go really slow and take very small bites, probably not anything more than a couple tablespoons. So some foods to be cautious with or avoid. The skins, seeds of fruits and vegetables, be particularly careful with. Broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts can be very difficult. Some people have a hard time with nuts and popcorn at this point, or you don't really want these at all, really. But those especially can be difficult. Even later, when we'll advance to having kind of everything available, those particular foods can still be a problem. So being really cautious with those. Tough meats, so anything that I always kind of think of a cube steak at this point, one of those steaks that you really have to chew, or anything that's overdone can be a problem. And then the pastas, the rolls, the breads, once again, these foods you really have to be careful with. They, again, can kind of give that feeling of swelling. So foods to always really be cautious with are obviously your simple carbohydrates. So I like to call these the crispy, crunchy carbs. Your chips, crackers, candies, chocolate, ice cream, sodas. These foods tend to kind of slip right through whatever surgery you've had without a whole lot of problems. Now, if you've had a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, you might get something called the dumping syndrome. From all of the excess sugar, because your body can't process it quick enough, is basically what's happening. But they unfortunately are easy to eat for a lot of people. And so people will say, oh, I can't tolerate the cooked chicken and soft vegetables, but I can eat some potato chips. And so that's really what we want to avoid. You want to be really cautious with these things, because that's what will kind of lead to old habits creeping their way back in. So some soft diet tips. You want to start off by adding no more than 1 to 2 soft foods each day. So usually I tell people to start with breakfast. A hard-boiled or kind of a soft-boiled egg is a really good thing to start with. Steamed fish at dinner usually works well. You can kind of transition from maybe a regular kind of blended soup to just a plain vegetable soup where those veggies are super soft and tender. Keeping portions smaller than purees too. The more solid something is, the more it kind of hits your stomach and makes you feel full a little bit faster. So really be cautious with that. Once again, along with that, remembering to chew thoroughly. You really want your foods to be a liquid kind of in your mouth before you swallow. And then again, once, keep those portions to about 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup at meals. And, if you have a dime at home, put that dime on the table, because that dime is about the size that you want each bite to be. If you're having bites that are bigger than that, it's too big. So back off to that dime-sized bite and chew really well. And most often than not, you will sail through without a lot of intolerance issues or vomiting and nausea. So the sample diet, I won't go through this verbatim, but you can do, hard-boiled eggs and bananas. I added the amount of protein just about that you would get from each of these mini meals, just to kind of give yourself an idea of how things can kind of add up throughout the day. Again, the tuna salad, you won't want to add, onions or relish to that. You'll just want to use maybe like a Miracle Whip or a low-fat mayonnaise. Again, with this, I really like to use avocado in my tuna or chicken salad. It sounds kind of funny, and it looks kind of funny because it's green, but it tastes really good. That avocado has a nice creamy, light texture and flavor to it. So as long as you can get past that kind of green color, it really does add a good flavor to your salads. I'll do it in egg salad too. And then just using some seasonings like garlic powder, celery powder, onion powder to add the flavor instead of those, cut up onions, peppers, relish, those normal celery maybe that you add to it. Cheese is usually well tolerated at this stage. Again, the steamed fish, peanut butter. Now, some people have a hard time with peanut butter because it's obviously kind of thick and sticky. I have a trick of adding 1 or 2 tablespoons of like a vanilla yogurt to peanut butter or almond butter. You can stick your nut butter in the microwave for about 10 seconds and get it pretty melted or really soft. and add a little bit of the yogurt to it. And it adds just enough moisture that it's a little bit easier to tolerate, but you can still get all of that good protein and that good heart-healthy fat from the nut butter when you add a little bit of that yogurt to it. If you are having a difficult time getting to your protein goal, which at this point most people still need some kind of protein drink, so go ahead and you can continue with that either at a more likely at a mini meal or kind of a snack time versus your regular sort of drinking time. So at 8 weeks, basically everyone should be on kind of the same quote unquote diet. So you can have any food really that is tolerated, all foods in moderation. Any texture is allowed, although we'll discuss, some textures are more difficult than others still, and you'll want to continue to listen to your body, kind of move at your own pace as you feel comfortable. You'll want to continue to keep portions small, about a half of a cup at most meals. Some people can do a little bit more at this point, more so with the sleeve gastrectomy. If you've had a gastric band, but you haven't had a band fill yet, which means when you go in and they actually inject that fluid into your band, you can probably do a little bit larger portions at this time as well. So again, foods to be cautious with, those dry meats, making sure your meats are soft and tender still, adding moisture, so some kind of broth or a low-fat gravy or a cream soup of some kind. High fibrous vegetables, once again, can be difficult, especially the cabbage, the broccolis, cauliflowers, the Brussels sprouts. These tend to be kind of the last vegetables that are really tolerated. And so if you have these, you make sure that they are well cooked and very tender. And then the pastas, the rolls, the breads, those can, again, cause that feeling of kind of swelling in your stomach. So protein and calorie goals. Females, at this point, I like to have my females at least 1,000 calories. And again, at least 60 grams of protein. Males, you are at about 1,200 calories and again, 70 grams of protein. Now, if you're eating, 1,200 calories as a woman, do not panic. That is absolutely fine. Especially if you're being active and that's where you feel good. That's a good calorie level to be at. Once again, our goal is not starvation. You want to make sure that you're eating enough to protect that lean muscle mass that you have. And we'll discuss this a little bit more in detail throughout. But if you're not eating enough calories or enough protein, your body goes towards those lean muscle stores that you have. And that's going to break down that lean muscle. And so if you ever start to gain back the weight, you tend to gain back a lot of fat and not that muscle. And also the muscle is what keeps your metabolism going. So we really want to make sure that we're eating enough to protect that lean muscle mass that we have. So once again, this is another sample diet. I'll kind of breeze through this one even a little bit faster. Again, add foods slowly. If you haven't had carrots yet, and that's kind of something that you're really craving, probably stick with other very well tolerated foods at that meal, and then just maybe have 1 or 2 baby carrots at that meal instead of what I have listed as 6. 6 is kind of when you're tolerating things and you're on a roll, basically. So this is kind of eventual. It'll probably take you a week or 2 to kind of transition to a completely normal diet per se. Again, if you want to continue with the protein drinks, if you're finding it difficult to get in that kind of minimum number for yourself, that is completely fine. So at this stage, around month 2 to about 1 year, is when a lot of people experience what I like to call the honeymoon stage. And this is when you are kind of continuing to lose weight. You might be watching what you're eating very closely and exercising regularly, and that weight is just sort of kind of dropping at a pretty regular pace. Now, this is not to say that you may not be having some, like weight loss plateaus. That's completely normal to have a week or 2 where maybe you don't lose anything, or you might gain a half a pound, or maybe you only lose a half a pound. It's frustrating, it's not fun, but it's a normal part of the process to reach those weight loss plateaus. So don't be surprised by that. But I really like to have people, when they are kind of in that honeymoon stage where the weight's coming off and they feel good and they're tolerating their foods, to really start to focus inward. And this is really important to kind of think about those issues that have kept you from being successful with other diets or attempts at being healthy in the past. Some individuals are grazers, myself is included in that, mindless eaters. Others tend to struggle more with emotional and stress eating. Almost everyone that struggles with some sort of weight issue, it's a bigger problem than just not eating the right foods and not finding the time to exercise. There's usually some sort of mental component to it. And so this is a good time to focus on that, because even if it's not an issue now during this honeymoon time, usually at some point it is an issue again, whether it's 6 months post-op or 6 years post-op. Almost everyone that I've had that's really had a hard time with this area, struggles with it again in the future. And so it's I think really imperative to do what you can to kind of plan for the future, so that when you reach this point that maybe some of these old habits or these old thoughts are coming back, you have an arsenal of tools at your disposal to use. So one of the things that I really like for, mindful eating, and this isn't just for my grazers or my mindless eaters, but even for those that have, emotional or stress eating, is a book called Mindless Eating: Why We Eat More Than We Think. And it's by Dr. Brian Wansink. And you might have heard about his, research. He's the guy that filled up the bowls of soup from the bottom up, and, did the research that said, people ate, 30 or 40% more soup when it was kind of constantly refilling itself than those where the soup was just, completely empty at the bottom, that wasn't being refilled. So anyways, this is a really good book, because even if you haven't necessarily struggled with mindless eating, it does just make you more mindful in general. And so if you're a stress eater or an emotional eater, even if you are having kind of an episode, if you want to call it, or if you're noticing some of those old habits, once you learn these techniques for being more mindful, it's hard to kind of go back to the other way of thinking, basically. It really kind of, puts everything in perspective and really makes you appreciate your meals in a different way, and maybe not obsess over them as much as before, if that kind of makes sense. Other thing, my individuals that really struggle with emotional and stress eating, it's really important to find alternative ways to cope with that stress. Reading books on emotional eating and stress eating can be helpful. Journaling for food and emotions, I think, is a good positive thing to do. But I think one of the most important things to do is to see a therapist. Most insurance companies will pay for this at this point, and with all of the new healthcare laws going into effect, you can thank Obamacare. A lot of these things are covered now, so it is a really good thing. And so look with your insurance company and see what you can find to help you out, because even if you don't think it's an issue right now, more than likely it will become an issue in the future if you've dealt with it before. So you want to make sure that you really have all those tools at your disposal to use in the future. So some long-term tips: avoid grazing. You really want to focus on having 3 meals daily and 1 to 3 small snacks. And this really depends on your routine and your activity level. The goal is for you to listen to your own hunger, fullness cues. I don't want you to think, oh, I have to have a meal every 3 hours because that's what the dietitian said, or that's what the surgeon said. I'm not hungry, but this is what they told me I had to do, because every person is different. Initially, yes, you kind of have to listen to us and eat more of a schedule, and that's mostly because your body's not sending those kind of normal hunger, fullness signals after surgery. But eventually our goal is to really be able to get you to listen to your own body. So when you're more active, typically you're going to need a little bit more in the snack department. And some people aren't, really big breakfast eaters. That's okay. You can kind of adjust things throughout the day, but you still want to avoid that grazing sort of behavior. Sitting down to eat meals is really critical. Research shows that just the act of sitting and enjoying a meal, and again with the following bullet point of avoiding multitasking during a meal, so not working, not having that TV on or that computer, those two things in combination, that sitting down and not having external distractions, makes healthy eating and just sort of weight loss success a lot more possible. And that's because when you're sitting down and you're not distracted, you're physically eating, obviously, but you're also mentally eating. And so many times when we're coming home from work and we're rushed, or we're at work and we're quickly eating our meal as we're typing or doing something else, you're physically eating, but mentally you're not taking that time to be present in the meal. And frequently what happens is when you do that, you're craving foods later on. You're craving that snack. You're craving that kind of getaway time or that little break that you didn't get before at your meal. So anything that you can do to really, sit down and to kind of have that peace and that quiet and that calm, even if it's for just 5 minutes and then you have to go back and rush into your meal, at least having those 5 minutes to really focus is very important and will probably help at least to kind of keep those sort of snacking signals at bay a little bit longer. And then remembering to eat your calories. We don't want to drink them. The frappuccinos, the sodas, the really high, caloric teas and coffee drinks, be careful with those. They can add up really quickly. So it's important to plan, 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 and plan. This is something that I really focus on with anyone that's a little bit later post-op, so at a year and plus, because this is usually what gets people into trouble further down the road. Excuse me. Everyone gets busy. We all have weeks where everything's kind of crazy. We all have different years where it's difficult, different days of the week. There's no excuse to not have some kind of plan. And you can do this in advance, keeping leftover healthy meals in the fridge, having high protein, complex carbohydrates in your car that you can keep, whether it's 2 degrees outside or 112 degrees outside. Trail mix, peanut butter, whole grain crackers, they don't really go bad, which is nice, or it takes a long time for them to go bad. So these are good foods to have. If you're going out to eat, make sure that you're looking online at menu items for healthy ideas. You can call ahead if they don't have a menu online and just ask the servers, or maybe you can talk to the cook before they get really busy, about different modifications that a restaurant can make. You'll be surprised at what they can do if you call ahead and talk to someone. And it makes it a lot easier if you call ahead, so that while you're sitting there ordering, they're not trying to rush back to the kitchen and kind of disrupting the whole meal. So use those those tips at your disposal. Some other things to do is to have some really good healthy staples in your house that you can make a nice healthy meal. Things like Greek yogurt, hard-boiled eggs, smoked salmon. I always have lunch meat in our house, and I can add either a lean lunch meat to it, or I always have salad in the house that I can add a lean lunch meat to it, or something like a canned chicken or canned tuna. Open-faced peanut butter and jelly is a really easy snack, or a good lunch, and that peanut butter or even almond butter has really good heart-healthy fats and a nice protein source too. And even last night's leftovers can be a great addition. So on to exercise. So the American Heart Association recommends about 150 minutes per week of moderate exercise. So the way this breaks down is about 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Now, for a lot of us, getting that whole 30-minute chunk may not be possible at one time. So there are a lot of good benefits from breaking it up even to 2 to 3 segments of 10 to 15-minute intervals. If you are more in shape, or you've been doing this for a while and you can do more vigorous activities, which we'll kind of discuss in the next slide, the difference between moderate and vigorous exercise, you can do about 75 minutes per week. So it's really important to raise that heart rate, and you can talk to your doctor kind of about what your specific heart rate goal during exercise is. But that's why there's that difference between the moderate and the vigorous. The other thing to remember is if you've had high blood pressure, heart disease, high cholesterol, you want to focus a little bit more on that aerobic activity, like the running, the biking, the elliptical machines, the swimming. That aerobic activity is really what keeps your heart health at tip-top condition. So you want to focus on about 40 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week for that. Now, I think the important thing to remember with all of this is, these recommendations are very kind of black and white, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we live in a world of color. And so, again, every week is not the same, every day is not the same, every month is not the same. And so you really have to kind of bend these recommendations to fit your life. Ideally, this is what we want you to do, and this is what we recommend. But at the end of the day, something is always, always, always better than nothing. So just because you didn't hit your goal that day of getting in a 40-minute walk, if you can do 5 or 10 minutes of something, that's 100 times better than not doing anything at all. And that's what the research is really starting to show us more and more, is those people that do make an effort to at least do something, to try to move in any way they can, they have a lot less, or they have much lower risks of complications and of other comorbid diseases because of that. And it really does change your mindset. If you can just do 5 minutes here or there, it adds up quickly throughout the day. So when you think it doesn't matter, I promise it does. So moderate activities include things like walking briskly, so at a pace of about 3 miles per hour or faster. So you at least want to reach that 3 mile per hour mark. Water aerobics would be a moderate activity. Bicycling slower than 10 miles per hour, or at least, that 10 mile per hour range. Tennis, a doubles game. So if you and a partner are playing against 2 other people, that would be moderate activity. Vigorous activities are walking or running at a pace that's more than 3 miles per hour. Swimming laps, playing a singles game of tennis, or bicycling for more than 10 miles per hour or faster, or at a rate of 10 miles per hour or faster. So vitamin mineral supplements. So we'll kind of break this up as well. The first vitamins that you'll usually take are going to be your multivitamin and your calcium supplement. So with your multivitamin, you want to look for one that contains at least 400 milligrams of folic acid. It should also contain some zinc and selenium. Now, most people will need to take 2 of these per day. If you have a chewable, you'll want to look. Sometimes you need to take more chewables than just the one a day. Each one's a little bit different. But those are the things that you want to look for specifically on the label. With the vitamin B12, we typically recommend about 500 micrograms per day, and that's if you're taking it sublingually, which means it dissolves. It's a little tablet that dissolves under your tongue. A lot of people will also choose to do the intramuscular route, and this means you'll schedule an appointment with your doctor's office, and once a month you'll go in and they'll just give you a little shot in your arm of 1,000 micrograms of the B12. Another thing that I'm having more and more patients do is using the nasal sprays with the vitamin B12. This also works well as long as you're having your labs, kind of checked regularly, but this can be a good thing. I've had kind of mixed results on it. So, some people like it, some people don't. I have more people doing the sublingual than really anything else. All right, so calcium and vitamin D, at least 1,200 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams. You'll want to look for a calcium citrate over a calcium carbonate. And so there's different kinds of ways that they make these calcium products. A Citracal is a very common calcium citrate version if you want to look for that. And the nice thing about the Citracal is they come in different varieties. They have chewables, they have the regular pills that you can just swallow, and they have petite pills that are really small. You'll want to look for a calcium supplement that has around 400 to 800 international units per day of the vitamin D. Some of you will have to take iron, some of you won't. So this is kind of one of those things to keep in mind. The iron you'll want to take with a vitamin C containing food. You could also take it with something like, orange juice, and again, oranges, grapefruit, strawberries. And really the important thing is to separate the calcium from the iron. So a lot of times I'll have people do the iron in the morning with their regular multivitamins once they have breakfast, and then take the calcium more in the afternoon with kind of lunch and dinner. You'll want to have your labs checked somewhere between 6 and 9 months post-op, and earlier if you kind of feel, if you're having symptoms or just sort of something feels off. Typically, I like to have patients with their labs drawn closer to that 6-month mark than the 9 months. So expected weight loss. It's really important to remember everyone is different. Some people lose, 5 pounds a week and it doesn't stop until 6 months, and some people lose it at a slower rate. So keeping that in mind, I think, is really, really important. The first month, and maybe even a little bit longer than that, a lot of that loss that you'll experience is water. If you remember from previous webinars, we talked about the glycogen stores that we have and how a big component of those glycogen stores is a water molecule. So when you're really excited those first few weeks, I'm glad you're excited, but a lot of it is that water weight. And so when your weight loss starts to slow down, people get really frustrated and upset. But actually, this is when the really good weight is coming off. So just keep that in mind. It's when your weight starts to slow a few weeks out from surgery that you're really starting to experience the benefits of surgery. Typically, from a nutrition standpoint, when we think about sort of optimal weight loss, 1 pound per week is fairly average. Now, this is for someone that's more so hasn't had surgery. So if you've had surgery, it's very common to have more than that, and that's fine. But I want to really encourage that if you're at least reaching that 1 pound per week mark, things are going really, really well. And again, some weeks this will fluctuate. You might lose a half of a pound one week, or you might not lose anything, or some weeks you might lose 2 to 3 pounds. That's a normal part of the process. So don't panic. It does happen. It's completely normal. It is frustrating and annoying, but keep those thoughts in mind. Another big thing to think about is really working on establishing that healthy environment. Continue to talk with family and other loved ones, maybe even coworkers, about making healthy changes not only at home but in the office place. Allow time for loved ones to really adjust to your new lifestyle and your new eating habits. A lot of times when patients have lost weight, they really want to turn everything around at home and get everyone eating healthy and exercising, and everyone might not be on the same page that you are. And so it's really important to try to encourage your loved ones and to nudge them to a healthier lifestyle, but nagging really doesn't make anybody want to change. So this is something that I've had a hard time with, being the dietitian in the family and wanting everyone to live this, healthy lifestyle, but it doesn't always work like that. And so you really do have to kind of give those gentle nudges. Trying to keep your family on track with a healthy living can be difficult. So having those open, honest communication pathways is important. One thing that I've really learned is that if you can be the role model, that's probably more important than anything, because when people see someone else eating healthy and eating good foods and exercising regularly, and they see them, maybe not even losing weight, but just feeling better about themselves and better about life in general and just having a more positive attitude, that makes other people want to change and want to try whatever it is that's working for this other person. So, just you living the lifestyle that you want to live will usually start to turn those loved ones in your direction as well. Some other things you can do, we really like to do the farmers market. I think this can be a great family activity. Now, January is not usually the optimal time for a farmers market, as most of you know. But, as the weather starts to get warm here in the next few months, it seems so long away right now, but this is a good activity to take your kids, take your grandkids, maybe it's just you and a spouse or a relative of some kind, but going, on a Saturday morning to the farmer's market, you can take your coffee and look and see what new vegetables they have, and you can see as kind of the summer goes on and as the weather changes, how the produce changes, and you can incorporate those different foods into your diet at home. It does make it a lot more exciting. And then asking loved ones to play a part in planning the meals and also preparing those meals. This is especially important, again, with children, trying to get them involved. If your family hasn't been eating healthy previously and your kids are a little bit more reluctant, this is usually where it's very helpful to have them help you cut up vegetables, taking them to the supermarket, taking them to the farmer's market to see where these foods come from, how we can use these foods in different recipes, it makes a big difference when they see how these foods prepared as opposed to it just kind of showing up on their plate. All right, so that is the end. We'll go ahead and go to some questions. I do want to point out the private Facebook group at the bottom. So this is really nice if you have had surgery or you're thinking about having surgery or you're going through the process of surgery and you want to be able to post questions in a safe environment and you don't want, maybe your college roommate or your cousin or whoever to see your questions. It is a private group, so only those in the group can see your remarks, which is nice. And then the bookmark knowledge base section of the Mexico Bariatric Services page has more information on the surgery, stages in the surgery, different recipes. There's a whole slew of information if you want to go there and learn a little bit more. All right, so bear with me here. We're going to try to go to the questions section. All right, so I have to expand this out. All right, so our first question, all right, why are gastric sleeve patients on purees longer than the bypass or the band patients? So gastric sleeve patients generally require a puree diet longer than the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass or the gastric band because the sleeve patients have a longer suture line where that portion of the stomach was kind of cut away. And so the suture line basically just needs a little bit more time to heal. And those purees are easier, I should say, for the stomach to tolerate than the softer foods. Even though softer foods are already pretty easy, that puree just gives it a little bit more time to heal. So that's why it is really important for anyone, that's had a sleeve or really any surgery that you've had to follow that diet progression accordingly. It's not just because the surgeon wants to be mean. There's a rationale behind it. All right, the next question. My friend used a pea-based protein powder after surgery. Is this a good protein to use? So the pea, hemp, and bean protein powders, they can be good when used in a balanced diet. However, after surgery, your stomach is so much smaller or it's, separated. And so it's the hemp, the bean, the pea proteins, they don't contain all the essential amino acids that the body needs. So this means that they aren't what we like to call complete proteins. And so because your volumes are so limited after surgery, I really recommend patients to use a protein powder that does have all of those essential amino acids. And those protein powders are typically your whey protein isolate, your whey protein concentrate, or a soy protein isolate. All right, next. I am 4 weeks out from surgery, from having a sleeve, and am tired of sweet protein drinks. What can I have instead? So this is really common. A lot of patients either have an aversion to sweets after surgery or they just get sick of those same kind of protein drink flavors. So there's a few things to do. One product that I really like is called Ungury. It's spelled Ungury, so like injury, but with a U at the beginning, so Ungury. And they have, along with chocolate and vanilla and strawberry, they have a chicken soup flavored protein and an unflavored that's really well tolerated. And so those can be very good alternatives. The other thing is really just to try to avoid artificial sweeteners. A lot of the protein drinks, the Crystal Lights and whatnot have the artificial sweeteners, and those tend to be difficult for a lot of people after a while. So trying to use more natural sources of sweetener, your fruit I think is the best thing because not only do you get all the vitamins and the minerals from the fruit, but you get the antioxidants, you get the fiber. So keeping that in mind. And then, having that unflavored protein powder, again, I think is really important to just kind of add a little sprinkling of different protein powders into, your cereal, even a sandwich, you can kind of hide a little bit of a protein powder in. You'd be amazed at how creative you can get. I always tell a lot of patients, instead of trying to think of using an entire scoop of a protein powder, specifically an unflavored protein powder, at a meal, try to use that one scoop throughout the day into various foods. And you'll be surprised at how easily it can mix into a lot of different things if you just kind of think outside the box a little bit. All right, my surgeon told me to avoid bread, but it is listed on the soft diet. Is bread okay? So kind of as I mentioned earlier, this can really go sort of both ways. You do have to be cautious with bread. If you want to have a sandwich of some kind, I think using an open-faced sandwich is a really good idea. Using smaller portions of the bread, remembering to continue to take small size bites or less is good. And then, really, the first time that you have bread, going really slow. So maybe just having that one slice of bread or maybe a half of a slice of bread with not a lot of toppings, just doing maybe like a little bit of butter or a jam to add some flavor, just to see how that bread by itself is going to sit in your stomach. Because the first time if you have it, if you put, a turkey on it or cheese or a big scoop of tuna salad, it's hard to maybe know what's really causing the intolerance. So going slow, I think, is the most important thing there. Bread, pasta, rolls, these foods aren't the enemy. And that's a lot of times kind of how we think about these carbohydrates and how they've been really portrayed in the media and even, a lot of health and medical professionals. But they're not the enemy. It's it's eating all of these foods in moderation, and you do have to be cautious once again because these foods can kind of swell with the pouch, but a lot of people do fine with them. So just listening to your body, and again, move slow. All right, what are the best foods to start off with when going from a puree to a soft diet? So specifically, I like to think about this with the protein-based foods, and my favorite for my fish eaters is some kind of white fish or a salmon that's been poached or has a really nice kind of broth-based sauce with it. The fish is so good because it's already flaky, it's super tender, it's very moist, and so you don't have to do a lot to it. It's usually very, very well tolerated. So that's kind of my number one for most people. Vegetable soup is another good thing. Now, at this point, so many people are completely sick of soup, but you've been doing blended. And so when you actually can have soup in its normal texture or consistency, it is kind of like having a brand new food again. And so, even if you strain the broth out and you want to do like the vegetables or the chicken or something out of a soup, that's usually a good starting point as well.
Caitlin,
Yep.
there is a question. I sent it to you. You can view it on the chat box.
Oh, okay.
It says, okay, let me read
Yeah,
it,
read that.
okay? So
Not showing
it's,
up on my chat box.
okay, I'm 5 months post-op and I'm still having difficulty eating 1,000 calories or getting my 80 grams protein. I have been recording everything I eat to see where I'm at. I feel fine. Do I need to stress about it or can I continue how it's going? I get approximately 600 calories with 40 grams protein.
Okay. Good question. So there's a few things kind of at work there. I would definitely encourage this person to either reach out on the Facebook page to me. You can send me a private message. Because your height, your weight that you started off with, your current weight kind of all go into, factoring into this equation of where you should be for calories and protein exactly. But just to kind of give you a broad answer, I think that's good. If you're recording what you're eating and you're feeling good, that's probably more important than anything, especially if you're at 5 months. If you're exercising and you're able to be active and you're not having any lightheadedness, you're probably doing okay. But like I said, sometimes even with that, it is good to try to get a little bit more calories in, or maybe even more protein. And so if you are encouraged to do that, I usually recommend people add in a little bit more of a heart healthy fat. So adding a little bit of olive oil to something, maybe using some avocados, having a snack of unsalted nuts or some peanut butter, maybe switching your milk from skim milk to a 1 or 2% milk to add just a little bit more of those calories back into the diet. But in general, if you're feeling well, I think that's typically the best indicator of how you're doing. And again, if you're 5 months out, just remember that in the next month or so, you want to be getting your labs checked. And so that's a good way to see, if you're at least getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need. We can't really tell if you're getting enough protein through your labs. So that's kind of the only faulty issue there. But we can at least make sure that all of your other micronutrients are falling into the correct sort of number range that we want to have. Thanks. That's a really good question. Okay, so let's see. We'll go back to the old question list. If you have another question, go ahead and add it in. I can't see the chat box for some reason right now, but Hazel will alert me if there's another new question that comes up. All right, so I own my own business and it's impossible for me to not work and eat at the same time. What do I do? So this can be a tricky situation for those individuals that either work long hours, or as this person said, own their own business and you just simply can't break away. There are still some things that you can do, and I kind of talked about it briefly before, is sitting down, even if it's for just 5 minutes, and trying to concentrate on that food and really be present in that meal. Another thing that I think is really important is, even if you're at a desk all day long, to try to move
Muted.
your
Muted. Unmuted.
maybe you're at your desk and you can move the chair 2 feet to the left, or maybe you can switch sides of the desk that you're on, but just sort of changing where your normal workspace is and changing that at mealtime can help, so that while you're doing your work, you're not focused on thinking about the next meal or wanting to graze or wanting to snack. So you're at least kind of separating that space a little bit, so that when you're at your desk or you're at your office space, in front of your computer or in front of the customer, whatever it is, that's separate from the space that you eat your meal. And like I said, even if it's just 2 feet, it makes a big difference in kind of how your mind and your body sort of processes the whole meal.
Caitlin, can I interrupt again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the same person who asked the question earlier, there's a follow-up question. She is asking if you need to stop taking vitamins before going in for lab work.
Oh, that's a really good question. And the answer is no. You can continue to take your same vitamins and minerals unless for some reason your physician or your surgeon specifically recommends that you stop something, but there is no test that we traditionally run with regards to your vitamins and your minerals that would require you to stop taking them. So that's a really good question. Go ahead and keep doing that. All right, so I think I only have one more question from our first round. And this says, I'm 4 weeks out from surgery and returning to work soon. I drive a truck and will have to eat out. What do I do? Or what should I do? So I actually have a lot of former patients that travel as part of their jobs, and actually a lot of truck drivers. So this can be done. It does take a little bit of planning. And it can be a little tricky, but it is possible. So especially with truck drivers, you usually have available some kind of small fridge or microwave in the back of the cab of that truck, specifically if it's a semi truck. So, trying to pack that fridge with healthy snacks like fruits and different vegetables, string cheese, whole wheat bread, hard boiled eggs. One of our favorite snacks when we're on the road is getting, carrots and celery and cucumber, and I'll slice everything up and we'll get hummus. And, we can just kind of eat that for miles and miles down the road. And I know especially truck drivers tend to drive long hours and late at night. And so that's a nice, easy snack that, doesn't have a lot of calories, gives you good nutrients, good vitamins, good fiber, and like I said, doesn't hit you with a ton of calories and fat. The other thing that's really important is to, look at restaurant menus. Most often you'll be going to, different kinds of fast food restaurants or chain restaurants, and most of those menus are online as well. And so ahead of time, you can look and see different calorie levels, different protein levels of foods that you like, and maybe trying to find alternative, foods that are a little bit more healthy. Wendy's has a lot of good salads. Their chili is actually really well tolerated for people that have had surgery, so you can kind of keep that in mind. McDonald's has a lot of, grilled chicken salads. They even have those wraps. You can take off, the top part of a bun or peel away some of the tortilla or something to make it a little bit easier so you're getting more of the protein. And then even some websites like Panera have, I forget what they call theirs. I think it's like a clean pairings or clean menu or something, where they have foods that are lower in calories or lower in sodium that are available to you. So using those resources that are already out there is a really good thing to do. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions at this time. So I want to thank everyone again for taking the time out of your day to listen to our webinar. If you have any questions, again, please go to our Facebook group. You can ask them there publicly if you want, or like I said, publicly within the group. It is a private group. Or if you want to send me a private message, that's fine as well. And I hope everyone has a great Monday and that you're staying warm in your neck of the woods. All right, thank you. Bye.